The Broncos have one of the best records in the NFL, and if you know anything about the Denver Broncos organization, it's that they are strong believers that a great defense wins championships, and this year is no exception. They've gone out and they've had a top 3 defense in the NFL, arguably the best defense in the league, whereas their offense, mediocre as hell. Even with a QB like Bo Nix under center, they struggle to find any sort of consistency on that end of the ball. The only reason the Broncos even manage to score at all is because their defense spoon feeds them the number of possessions that this offense get. When it comes to number of total drives by an offense in the NFL, the Denver Broncos are far ahead of anybody else. Why is that? Because the defense will go out there and get a 3-and-out ASAP, get the Broncos the ball right back. And now this offense does manage to get, 30, 40 points a game every once in a while. But with those 40-point games, the very next week, you see this same Broncos offense struggle to find even just their second touchdown of the game. There have been numerous games where they were only able to score 1 touchdown. So that's exactly what I'm talking about when I say that there's a lack of consistency on the offensive side. They went up against the Las Vegas Raiders, a Las Vegas Raiders team who looks like one of the worst in the NFL. They only have 2 wins, and they've been playing like shit all year. Anyway, the Broncos win this game, but barely. It isn't because of their offense. I mean, Bo Nix went out, and he had a QB rating of 26.7. He threw 2 interceptions. He barely had any passing yards at all. The run game was completely shut down. The reason the Broncos beat the Raiders is because the Raiders offense was worse. Why was the Raiders offense worse? Because the Broncos defense has shown up like they've been able to do all year long. They had 6 sacks on Geno Smith this game, 5 tackles for loss, and 11 QB hits along with an interception. That is going to stuff out anybody's offense, let alone the Las Vegas Raiders, who do look like one of the worst teams in the NFL. Shout out Vance Joseph and this defense, because this is a Super Bowl winning defense, and yet they're stuck with such a shitty offense. And we'll talk more about this Broncos team in a second, but for right now, I want to remind you guys to slow down, like the video, and subscribe to the channel. We're on the road to 10,000, so please subscribe. All right, let's get back to the video. If you are a starting quarterback in the NFL, you are trying to avoid this Denver Broncos defense by any means necessary, because if you go up against them, they will pound you all game long. They lead the league in QB knockdowns with 40, with QB pressures and 111, and most impressively, they lead the league in sacks with 46. The next closest team in the NFL, Seattle Seahawks, with 32. Yes, by far, the Denver Broncos defense gets the most sacks in the NFL, and because of this, they've been able to win so many games this season. If we were to take a look at the Broncos sack leaders this season, you got Nick Bonito at 9.5. Very impressive, but what's even more impressive is that there are 2 other players on this roster with 5+ sacks, because Jonathan Cooper has 7.5. Zach Allen has 6. Hell, you can keep going down and down this list. Almost everybody who's played a defensive snap for the Broncos this season has a sack to their name. And why is it? It's probably because of the incredible defensive scheming that Vance Joseph has been able to do. Now, he's been a pretty good defensive coordinator for years. Hell, if you turn the clock all the way back, he was the former Denver Broncos head coach. Now, of course, did it work in those 2 seasons when he was a head coach? No, they didn't really have a winning record. Could he have been given a longer leash? Maybe. But the fact that he's been able to have a little bit of a redemption arc here in Denver, that's a pretty good story. Now, as for the Broncos defense, one of their best qualities is that they are not giving up that many yards per attempt. Hell, when it comes to yards per play in the NFL, they only allow 4.3, which is the least in the league. That's probably what has to do with them having such a good defense. I mean, they give up the least passing yards per attempt. They give up the least rushing yards per attempt. They do not give up explosive plays. That's probably also why they've given up the least amount of passing touchdowns. This defense will not let you air it out on them, okay? That's one thing that Vance Joseph has been very particular about. And you're not even going to be able to throw the deep ball when your QB has no time in the pocket, because that's how quickly these linebackers and defensive linemen are getting to the opposing quarterback. Now the question is, can the Denver Broncos defense maintain this level of play when it matters most? And will they have enough help from the offensive side of the ball to where they can win the big games? Because if we take a look at the record for the Denver Broncos this season, which is something I have been avoiding all video long, it's that the Broncos have a very weak schedule, at least so far this season. If you were to look at their wins are extremely weak. Their first one was against the Tennessee Titans, the worst team in football. They only have one win to their name currently, and it doesn't get very much better from there. They also beat the Cincinnati Bengals, a Bengals team with no Joe Burrow or Joe Flacco. The team had Jake Browning when the Denver Broncos played them. Then they went up against the New York Jets, another 2-win team. Of course, they're going to beat them. They beat the New York Giants, another 2-win team. You can see the pattern here. In fact, a majority of their wins are competing with each other to see who can get the first overall pick. It is embarrassing, all right? I mean, they were barely able to string out wins against other terrible teams like the Houston Texans, who didn't have CJ Stroud for most of it, or like the Las Vegas Raiders, a game in which I went into depth very thoroughly, okay? Now, for the rest of their season, they do look to have a slightly harder schedule, but in all honesty, they did get a pretty impressive win against the Kansas City Chiefs this week, where they used the same formula of relying on the defense and special teams to keep them in this game long enough for Bo Nix and this offense to pull their shit together. And that is, of course, what happened, because at halftime, the score was 6-6. But after that break, then the Kansas City Chiefs, their defense was a bit lackluster, and the Broncos, not only were they scoring touchdowns, but they were getting into field goal range and making it every single time, which is why it was so poetic that they walk it off with a game-winning field goal by Will Lutz, who was the real MVP of this game. Now, of course, the question is, can the Broncos maintain that success? I mean, they are 9-2 this season, and it looks like they can finish the year with about 12 wins. They play the Commanders, Raiders, Packers, Jaguars, Chiefs, Chargers again, so they could easily go 3-3. They'll have 12 wins on the season, but they won't be first in the conference, and they'll most likely have to play someone sitting around in the hunt or towards the end of the wild card pack, and that includes teams like the Bills and the Chiefs and the Ravens. And all it takes is one unlucky matchup in the first round, and this Broncos miraculous run is over. But terrible news for the Broncos, because teams competing for the 6th and 7th seed are the Buffalo Bills, the Kansas City Chiefs, and even the Baltimore Ravens. So I'm telling you right now, if they have to go up against any of those teams in the wild card, yeah, they're first round exits. And it's looking like it's going to stay that way unless Bo Nix and this offense can pull their shit together. And I'm hoping for the defensive sake that they're able to do so, because like I've mentioned, this defense is good enough to win a Super Bowl. So we'll just have to wait and see if the Broncos offense is able to pull their own weight. Now, it isn't impossible, because this exact thing happened in 2016, where the Broncos had the best defense in the NFL, and they would go on to win the Super Bowl with an old-ass Peyton Manning who could barely throw the ball even just 10 yards down the field. So like I said, this is possible, and this Broncos team has done it before. We'll see what the NFL scriptwriters have in store for us. But anyway, that's about it for this video. I'll catch y'all later. Much love. Deuces.